All right, welcome everybody to Raw and Relentless. I got my friend Bob Bowdon, right? I said that
That's
right.
it.
Okay, Bob Bowdon on, and Bob, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're all about and what you're working on?
Thanks, Bo. Well, I'm a former television host and talk show host and producer who then became a documentary filmmaker. So I spent most of my career in the world of content creation and specifically video content. Well, 95% anyway. And then I realized that there was a need that had not been met. And that need was a way to monetize, which is a fancy word to make money from film and video.
Mm-hmm.
So we built a platform to do that. It's called VidaFair. Some pronounce it VidaFair, by the way. But it is a place where you can upload content, set your own creator fee for people to rent your content, and allow people to, you get a link, in other words, that you can post on social media, you can send out an email blast or put on websites. You can even advertise the link, which is really so much easier these days than it has ever been before. And that way you can make the amount of money that you set for yourself, kind of like Airbnb, except instead of for content condos, it's for content.
Mm.
And that's how our platform works.
So let's go back in history. What were you a TV host for?
So I'd started out with a couple of engineering degrees, by the way, and then had a career change at the wise, ripe old age of 27. And people were telling me at the time, "Oh, it's too late. You can't have a career change now. You're too old."
Yeah,
And I thought
yeah.
to myself, "That seems ridiculous. I don't feel that old at 27."
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up kind of working alongside college interns when they were 20 and I was 27. But I got into film and television. I was first a location scout for New Line Cinema, and then
Really?
sure.
Wow.
Oh, okay, all right.
I mean,
Well,
I
yeah, it was
remember when New Line Cinema logo would come up on movies, like those were good movies, right?
it was a big deal. It was an indie film house back in the day,
Yeah.
but enough where the budgets were not nothing. They were, you had people, well, please put it this way: we had 3 location scouts for little film, and our whole job was just find apartments and bars and
Mm-hmm.
supermarkets and all the scenes of the film. You had to find locations to rent out for. So,
Yeah.
3 location scouts shows you some indicator of the size of the budget.
Sure.
Anyway, yeah, no, it was fun. So then I went on to television, and I kind of realized the world of filmmaking wasn't really suiting me. It was kind of feast or famine, and sort of like you have a gig and you work like crazy for 5 months or something, and then that film is over and you're unemployed again, and you got to find another film to work on, and then you work like crazy for another 4 or 5 months or something, and then you're unemployed again.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized kind of television had a little more predictability
Mm.
to that industry. So I moved on and did that, starting as a researcher for a talk show, and then I became an associate producer, and then I eventually became a producer, and then eventually a host and a news reader. In other words, a anchor reporter type role in local stations. Eventually, Bloomberg Television, where I was doing. I started out as a uh, technology reporter, and then became a markets reporter for Bloomberg.
Mm.
Did a bunch, interviewed Donald Trump incidentally long before he was in politics, so
Mm-hmm.
live on live television there, and other people like Martha Stewart and people that were more famous in the 2000s decade than they are now. Some of them, although I guess Donald Trump's a lot more famous now.
Yeah.
But
And Martha's back to being famous. I just watched the Martha documentary. I mean, amazing story, amazing woman. I mean, talk about having some fortitude and grit to persevere.
yeah, I mean, I went from interviewing her when she was at the top to then reporting outside the courthouse during her trial for
Mm.
inside trading, and and in retrospect, it does seem like it was over, like she was made an example of to a degree that seemed unfair. It was,
Yeah.
I mean, as people like to say, I'm not a lawyer, but it just seemed like an overzealous prosecution. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable.
That's basically what the documentary was kind of portraying as well. They basically showed how the DA could not pin her on insider trading. There was not enough evidence on insider trading. So they tried going after her for lying to the federal authorities. And they really, 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 really had to stretch that to be able to even get any charges. And when it went to trial and the jury there was just some people that hit the stand that just made her look like a very bad person, and the jury kind of decided against her. I mean, kind of like what you're saying. From what I remember and what the documentary portrayed, it seemed like, yeah, she was just made an example of. Who, by the way, the DA that was in charge of that case was Jim Comey.
Oh, is that right? I'd
Yeah,
forgotten. If I probably knew that and forgot it so many years later.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
All
so,
right.
so you were a TV host of which shows?
So, not famous. There was a syndicated show called Digital Cafe that I was a host of, and then I then ended up executive producing and hosting a PBS talk show
Mm.
called Two Way Street, which was a debate format show where it would be two against two on different subjects each week, and then we had a live studio
Oh
audience where I
wow,
kind of would go out Phil Donahue style with a microphone and kind of hold it up and have
yeah.
audiences talk to the people, but we would cover different stuff. So it would be a debate on corporate food
Mm.
policy, and then there'd be a debate on foreign wars.
Mm-hmm.
Iraq, for example, which at the
Mm-hmm.
time was a big deal, and et cetera. So different, completely different topics each week, but always two versus two, and I was the moderator.
Very similar to what Bill Maher had back in the day. Um,
Right. I mean, he wouldn't quite have it balanced like that. He
yeah, yeah.
right. Like we would have like policy people two against two, like very. But one thing we did do, which has now become, I don't know if you know, so Mark Halperin has a YouTube show now called Two Way,
Okay.
which has a remarkable similarity to what our show is called Two Way Street. But what he does is allow people to just zoom in and ask political questions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also tries to be equal balance on kind of in a political context of Democrat Republican balance, and we had that too. Except our video questions were recorded because we didn't. There was pre Zoom, but we would have. I'm going on a long tangent, aren't I?
No, it's
Anyway,
fine. I love it.
okay, yeah, we would have people in our show. We would have people record video questions about the topic, like because the topics would be posted in advance, and
Sure.
so that was our version of two-way video
Mm-hmm.
back then.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny how the name and both the kind of conceptual structure of the show were similar.
Man, you got one hell of a resume.
Well, you could. Some might say, "Gee, it's all over the place and unfocused," and But yeah, it's certainly. But then I became a documentary filmmaker after that.
Okay.
I did a film uh, for which I became best known after all these other things. I did a film about corruption in public education that ended up getting Warner Brothers distribution and Netflix distribution and an 11 city theatrical release and et cetera. So it did very well.
What was the name of that?
It was called The Cartel. But it was about corruption in
Oh,
public education.
I think I've seen that on Netflix. I haven't watched it, but I've seen the title on Netflix.
Sure.
Now I got to
Well,
watch it.
it's no longer on Netflix. It was on Netflix for like 5 or 6
Oh,
years or something like that.
okay.
But it's now on some other sites, including our new streaming platform, VidaFair,
Okay.
which is so yeah. So that's yeah. It was a labor of love, certainly for sure.
And so what was the consensus from that documentary about that
Well, it's a
subject?
controversial subject, and which is if you're going to pick a subject to do a documentary about, it's not a bad strategy to begin with something.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say, as a subject matter, most people hear that it sounds boring to them. They hear like education documentary, it sounds like boring squared to some
Yeah.
people. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, I didn't feel like our project was boring at all. It was, and yes, it did elicit some very strong positions. But to answer your question, yeah, my view is that every category of schools has great, good, mediocre, and terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But for those who are stuck in terrible public schools, in that percentage of the public schools, I support school choice. And I think they need other options. And just to leave them stuck there with the promise that someday we'll throw enough money at these same people and it'll suddenly become a better school, I think that's a disservice to those kids. But I'm not disparaging all public schools, and I'm not nor am I saying all charter and private schools are great either.
Sure.
They're all a mix. They're all a mix.
Yep.
But if you are sort of stuck in one bad place, seems to me a different answer is called for.
Well, this is now going to be another popular subject, right? Because Trump is one of the things that ran on, and what he wants to do is get rid of the Department of Education and give it
Sure,
back to the states.
sure.
So,
So first of all, that's kind of a completely different subject matter, quite frankly. In other
hmm,
words, if the concept is that the 10th Amendment says the federal government doesn't have a role in anything that's not in the Constitution, and the word education is not in the Constitution, then you would say, well, why are these federal bureaucrats just taking, the states all send the Washington D.C. money, and then Washington sends some of it back to the states? Why even do that?
yeah,
Why not? What are they? When was the last time you heard of a public school student or teacher saying, well, thank goodness for the federal government? They've really helped our school do better. You
yeah,
basically never hear that ever. So why are they spending a bunch of money at the DC level? But that's one question completely separate of this other question, which is once you do have whatever funding you have at the district and state level, then what choices you make of how you spend that money. That's, you could be pro-choice school choice or against school choice, and still that question would remain whether or not DC is taking funds.
yeah. I recently listened to a podcast with Mark Cuban, and he had an interesting take on it because um, he said, like, look, he's always been kind of an opponent of Trump, right? And he said, look, I'm all for reducing government spend. I'm all for decreasing the federal government. He's like, however, you have to have a plan in place if you're going to make those kind of drastic measures. Because, okay, you want to get rid of the Department of Education and bring it back to the states. Well, now what's going to happen is the states now have to fill that role. And now the states are going to have a bloated government to try and do what the federal government was doing. So, yes, you might be reducing taxes on the federal side, but then the state's got to make it up on the state side to be able to pay for what the federal government was doing. I mean, like you said, it's kind of a controversial subject. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions about it, but it's just an interesting take. What
If I
Cuban,
were on the if I were on back in my old self, and I were on the TV with Mark Cuban, who had just said that as the other guest, I would say, "Tell us, Mark, what is the federal government? Help us understand." They spend many billions of dollars. Now there are some things they do that basically just sending money for what's called Title I funding for low income students. So
yeah,
districts that have a higher percentage of low income kids get money from the federal government. But you don't need a bunch of bureaucrats to be sitting in offices having meetings and conference rooms drinking coffee every day to do that. You can just block grant that same funding to the state, and actually more of it, because you don't have all the people sitting in the conference rooms in
yep,
DC.
yep.
So apart from kind of just a money funnel, which could happen whether or not there's a building called the Department of Education, I would challenge how much actual value is being generated in DC.
Yep. No, I agree. Absolutely. So, documentary filmmaker, and now you've led yourself to this platform to monetize content creation. How did you end up on down this road?
Uh, I almost think, I always think to myself, I have to regulate myself to not to sound like too grandiose or self-congratulatory. I almost feel like it's kind of a bit of an ethical, moral cause, though. The idea that like people should be allowed, there should be a way to make money in today's 2024 internet streaming space that's really fair. That's fair to everyone. If you started over with a blank sheet of paper and said, how would you design a system to allow people to make money from their videos? What would you do? And that's essentially what we've done at VidaFair.
Mm.
That the idea that what would you do? You would have people set their own creator fee. You would also not require them to be exclusive. So we're not exclusive. They can monetize anywhere else they want. They have no contracts to sign with us. We're a very creator focused platform. They can remove their content anytime they want and never pay another penny. There's no subscriptions on the site at all. I hate subscriptions. I'm as I like to say, I'm on team hashtag subscription fatigue. I'm like sick of subscribing to stuff. I'm sick of forgetting to unsubscribe to things
Mhm.
that I stopped watching.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so to me, this paradigm needed an approach. Monetization needed an approach where you could set a fair fee, and then even in an additional sense. So people will often say this, well, what's your percentage? So they set their own creator fee of what a rental, how much they make each time their content is rented. What's your percent? Here's the thing, we actually started that way, and then we thought, well, even there's a way to be fairer than that. Like, why should we get more money if there's two people with, let's say they both have half-hour long independent films, and one wants $2 per rental and one wants 5. Well, if we're doing the same service for both half-hour films, storage and streaming, why should we make more money because the one person charges 5 and we're doing the same service. We're storing the same size content. We're streaming the same size content. And the best way to price something, it's you want to be profitable, but the fairest way to price something is price it based on your costs, not on what you can get, in other
Mm,
words. So that's what we did. Our pricing, our platform fee is purely based on the duration of the content, not how much the creator charges for their fee.
got it.
So the person renting the content pays the sum of those two numbers, the platform fee and the creator fee. But we decided the fairest thing to do is to set a platform fee that's just based on our costs, which is storage and streaming costs.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of, maybe that's too much detail for that.
No,
But
that's
anyway, my larger point is, how would you design the most fair way to allow people to monetize their own work in this regard? And so I mentioned independent films, though we also monetize. We kind of launched by mostly marketing to independent filmmakers, but we see our future is more in the way of podcasts and other kinds of video content like music videos or comedian stand-up videos or other things too.
this is a fantastic idea because a lot of those categories, especially comedians, like Andrew Schultz, right? He put his special on YouTube and charged for it, right? Instead of going to Netflix or HBO, he put it on YouTube, and he didn't have to pay all of those distribution fees to Netflix or HBO, and he killed it with his special. And I think he's getting
Mhm.
ready to put out another special the same fashion. He ran everybody through his website and paid through the website or however that worked. I don't remember, but yeah, I agree. I mean, this is kind of where everybody is going. I think Tim Dillon did something similar. It was either Tim Dillon or Louis C.K. Louis C.K. is actually doing all of his specials through his website now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of those are subscription-based platforms, however, though, and so that's distinct from ours. Ours is not subscription-based, and so there's that. But that's also, of course, a very kind of gatekeeper-focused set of guys you just named there. And our view also is to not be a gatekeeper type site. We basically want to be the pay-per-view YouTube,
Mm.
where essentially I'll say we allow any kind of video, but no porn, and we have a few other categories like copyright violation. You can't just upload some movie or something that you didn't make, or whatever. So we have a few flags, in other words. But apart from those very basic things,
Mm.
we kind of anything you would see on YouTube, in other words, is allowable for VidaFair to be uploaded. And so we have an Android app, an iPhone app, a website. People you can upload, and you can even put it on a flat screen TV through what's called Apple AirPlay or Google
Mm-hmm.
Chromecast.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're doing.
So if we take something like my podcast here, Raw and Relentless, and I put it on your platform, right? And typically on average, most of my podcasts are around an hour, right? 50 minutes to an hour. What would someone have to pay to be able to listen to my podcast through your platform?
Well, the one thing you would do is set your own fee of how much you want to make each time someone watches the content.
Hmm.
So you would decide, do I want to make $1, $2, $3, $4, $5? You would decide that for yourself. Just like Airbnb, if you set the price too high, you probably won't get a lot of rentals, and so that's that.
Mm-hmm.
But then that would be added to the platform fee, which in the case of something you say, if it's say 60 minutes,
Yeah.
then it's about a penny and a half per minute. So it'd be about 90 cents would be the platform fee. So you could charge $1, and then the retail price would be like $1.90 roughly. I'm rounding off.
Sure.
You could want $2, and then it would be about $2.90 because the platform fee stays based on the duration of the content.
Mm.
So it would be, you could charge $3, and then the retail price would be $3.90. So it's basically works like that.
So the platform
And
fee is passed on to the listener?
yeah, the listener pays the simple sum of the platform fee for the cost of stream to that listener, and there's also financial transaction fees that we have to pay when the listener, banks. You find out if you do this kind of work, banks
Yep.
were not set up for micropayment transactions.
Yep.
Based the
Yep.
way credit card fees and
Yep.
those kinds of Google Pay and Apple Pay fees are not really set up for that. So, yeah, so basically it could be something as simple as that, though, where you're getting $2, they're paying $2.90 for an hour of programming,
Interesting.
and
And that's one.
and
So
then,
the $2 is 100. If I'm charging two, that's 100% mine. I don't have any cost from your platform coming out of my pocket.
there's an initial cost of $5.99 that you would spend to buy the credits, from which you could then actually upload a total of 5 videos from that $5.99. So yeah, there's a little bit of an initial upload, but it's less than you'd spend on a sandwich that you'd have at lunch.
Wow, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and then furthermore, so then people, we've spent a lot of time thinking about marketing this stuff too.
Yeah.
One scenario is what's been called the freemium model, where you give out free content, and you say, oh, and by the way, I have a paywall section over here for if you're a super fan, you can come over here and watch this special interview with Bob Bowdon about VidaFair, because it's a really good one, and you could do it like that, like the way people use Patreon.
Yep.
In other words,
Mm-hmm.
it being, however, a subscription site, and ours is not. Ours is more of what used to be called pay-per-view type site.
Mm-hmm.
So, or you could do it a way where you have a podcast and you upload the first half on YouTube, and then you could say for part two, if you want to watch the rest, hey, you're supporting me, and it's only $2.90. It's over here, a one-time charge. You never pay another penny. And then people just go and they spend a la carte, and they support you by watching the second half. That would be another way to do it.
So how do you and I compete against other platforms like Spotify and YouTube that don't charge
Oh,
for
sure.
the same
Well, they're
content?
advertiser-based monetization, which is inherently vastly lower compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So, you, on average, a YouTube person who is monetized, and to be monetized, first of all, you have kind of a gauntlet. You need to get 1,000 subscribers. You need to get 4,000 hours of viewing time, and all that. By the way, it has to be content without certain words in it or certain sort of controversial stuff.
Yep.
You do all that gauntlet, and then you're monetized, and then on average you're making 0.2 of a penny per view. So that's the YouTube rate. If you Google it and say on average, what does a monetized YouTuber get per view? It's about 1/5 of 1 penny. So if you're somebody who gets 20 million views or something like that, you're like some super famous person. I guess that money could add up. But for the average person, think of it. If you're compared, we just talked about an example where you would get $2.
Yep.
Compare that to 1/5 of 1 penny per view.
Right.
So, right, it's a big difference.
That is a huge difference.
And just to complete the thought, so there's advertiser-based monetization. Its problem is that the payments are really tiny.
Yep.
So you need an enormous audience to make it make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a subscription-based, and then there's what we are, pay-per-view or TVOD-based. So they're completely separate. The advertiser-based problem, as I said, it's very low compensation. The subscription-based problem is that half of America will just not subscribe. You pitch it to them, and their brain shut off. And the surveys have showed this, that they will not subscribe to anything else, no matter what.
Right.
But Patreon is there if you want to pursue a subscription-based monetization model. And the key point here is that we're not inconsistent with that either. Someone could upload the same paywall content, the same sort of special show or second half of the podcast, or however they want to do it. They could put it on both Patreon and VidaFair and let the customer decide. Mm-hmm. If you want to subscribe to me, here's the rate, and you get this on Patreon. Or if you just want to pay a la carte and have no subscription, you can get the same content over here on VidaFair. It's up to you. Oftentimes, when you give people more ways to buy something, you oftentimes get more people buying. because there are different kinds of consumers.
Interesting. I mean, that's
So
like,
again, exclusive. You could have the same content that's monetized on subscription basis as well as on uh, pay-per-view basis on our site.
yeah, going back to your YouTube example of the uh, advertiser monetization. I mean, if you've got somebody like Joe Rogan or Mr. Beast, who I think Rogan averages 10 million views per podcast,
Yeah.
and even if you're charging $1 per podcast, I mean, and he has what, 3 podcasts per week? That's some insane money.
The thing is, of course, I'm not sure he needs any more money. I'm
No,
not sure
no,
money is
no,
his
no.
motivator at this point. He's probably so rich that he doesn't much think about. Maybe he does. I don't know, but yeah, you could certainly imagine a scenario where someone that big.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm. This is my dreams. I'm going to tell. But in essence, someone that big has even a special after hours segment. You know how like you mentioned Bill Maher, like he has that.
Yep.
It's something for super fans to go rent, which is in addition to his regular content. And for that, he charges a couple bucks or something like that. And you could imagine that being a, like a windfall of, like a whole lot of extra money.
How long has your platform been around now?
A couple of years we've been a lot live, but you'd be surprised how long it takes to from scratch,
Oh,
build a platform, build apps,
yep,
get it all the bugs worked out.
yep.
Then you've got to get sample content. We now have about 500 pieces of content it's all there, but we haven't really scaled yet, and that's kind of what we're trying to do now.
Uh, have you got anybody on the platform that's been successful thus far?
Like yes, but it's nobody famous yet. So in other words, we have again, mostly independent films, some comedians, some music videos, but over 90% are independent. You could go to our site right now. It's VidaFair, VidaFair.com. Or
Hmm.
anyone watching could download the iPhone app right now
Hmm.
or Android, and you can see what's on there right now, and you'll see mostly films.
Okay.
And they're all for rent. You can see exactly how it works, basically. And then one other thing just to add, which is so you can pay purely a la carte. You can just pay for that one price and rent it that one time. We also realize there are people that want to pay less with a volume discount. A lot of the reason subscriptions exist is people have this sense of like wanting a volume discount.
Hmm.
And so we said, how can we do that without obligating people to repeating charges? Because again, I hate repeating charges, and a lot of other people do. Well, a way to do a volume discount without repeating charges is to offer what we call our grain packages. So you basically buy a package of tokens, our grain tokens, and then you pay once. You get a bunch of them. I'm trying to keep my hands in the frame. You get a bunch of them, and then you use a little bit at a time for each rental. You end up paying like half the price that way. Or you can see on each video, you can see how much less you pay if you did it through the grain tokens.
Hmm.
So that's another thing we offer too, a volume discount, but not through a subscription, but through basically a token package.
That's smart. I love that. That's great.
Thank you.
Huh. So is there any limitations? You said porn. Is there any
Yeah, we
other
have five
limitations?
tags that we kind of don't allow. So it's porn, copyright infringement. If you upload, the Top Gun Maverick or something
Yeah.
and just want to try to monetize it. Uh, Porn, copyright infringement, child abuse, which is correctly broad term, but I think you got it. Um, Another is doxing. So we come on and say, hey, everyone, Bo lives at this address. Go show up at his house. Yeah. And another one is threats. Just
Mm.
essentially, it's what the Supreme Court used to call the clear and present danger standard
Yeah.
for, free speech limitations. Yeah. So those are the five things.
So, like you said earlier, a lot of times, like on YouTube, if you say certain things or you talk about controversial topics, you're deplatformed or you're demonetized. That doesn't really exist on your platform.
Yeah, think about it. Their model says we need to put advertisements next to your content, that's your
Yeah.
video.
Hmm.
And so if someone may not want their company advertising next to someone with some kind of controversial opinion,
Hmm.
presuming it's not anything like a threat or anything like that, but just nevertheless an opinion that enrages people, whichever direction or for whatever reason. So it's a business kind of requirement almost. It's inherent to the advertising business model to not want controversial stuff at all.
Hmm.
Don't upset people too much in any direction, because advertisers then we won't be able to put advertisements. Whereas our model, we don't have advertisers at
Yeah,
all.
right.
People, your own fans are renting your own content.
Kind of similar to what Rumble's doing too. Anyway,
But they have ads though. They have ads on
oh, do
Rumble.
they?
Yeah, they do. Now you can also pay for the thing where you don't see the ads, just
Yeah,
like YouTube does.
yeah.
You know.
Now, can the content creator also have ads within their content?
We have no problem. It's up to them. It's up to Our view is that if they annoy their fans by
Mhm.
having too many ads, or something like that, then okay, they probably won't get a lot of repeat business. It's up to me. Our view is like we shouldn't have to police that. They should police themselves in that regard. If there's too much advertising, that's on them.
So, in a perfect world, Bob, you, in a sense, could circumvent a lot of these uh, movie distributors like Warner Brothers and all of them. So, if Tom Cruise wanted to put the next Top Gun on your platform and just charge per view, he could make a hell of a lot more money than what he would make through Warner Brothers.
So, first of all, from your lips to God's ears, but I would just say too that we're for first of all completely to me that's absolutely clear that people could self-distribute large projects. You mentioned Joe Rogan before, so independent, like a large budget film, absolutely, absolutely. But that said, it's not easy taking on big tech, which is kind of what we're
Sure.
trying to. We're a little company,
Yeah.
and so we kind of need people's help. Like we're trying to get off the ground here.
Yeah.
So I don't want to come off, as if like, oh, that's right. We're going to get that
Yeah.
next Top Gun movie right on. Gee, I mean, we're trying to make it in this world and get known. People, it's hard to get known. It's hard to get people to care. They even to listen long enough to realize what service you're offering. So, but that's what we're trying to do.
I mean, do you think that from your past resume, your past network, that you could kind of circle back to a lot of your old content or contacts when you were in the TV world or in the movie world and try and sway some of these productions to your platform?
I mean, theoretically, but I will tell you that a lot of the people who are steeped in the ecosystem of the conventional entertainment world, to them, this concept of like a internet based monetization sounds like small time. Like in other words, I almost think if we were to grow enough to be some sort of point where we're large enough that then they would, I don't know, it's almost a thing where it's like it would take the independent minded, outside the box thinkers
Mhm.
to to discover us and champion us enough to then get some of these hardwired entertainment,
Sure.
legacy entertainment people
Yep.
to become believers.
Yep.
Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. No, I completely get it. It's kind of like the government. People are stuck in their ways.
Yeah, it's not like they think it's dumb to monetize online. They just think of it as small time. They think of it as kind of beneath their, they're like real movie people, and they use Paramount and Warner Brothers to go to theaters,
Yep.
and that's
Yep.
what they do. And then maybe Netflix came, even when Netflix came along, it was kind of like for a while it had to earn its right to be respected by those types.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it is, right, is not only you're trying to change the mindset of those people in the industry, but now you're also battling against the movie theater industry as well, which, I mean, that is a huge, huge industry, which I didn't even know until recently that, you might know this better than me, but I guess from what I understand, when a movie releases, their agreement with the movie theaters is typically the theaters get 50% of the ticket sales or something like that?
Sure, sure. And plus the theaters, well, they also have big lease payments a lot of
Yeah,
times, and
yeah,
they have employees and all this
sure.
cost as well. And So it's I hate to think of physical brick and mortar movie theaters as kind of dying, but
Yeah.
I certainly think it's kind of will be less than
Yeah.
it has been in
Mm-hmm.
the future.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my view is almost like I don't feel like it's so much competition with them
Yeah.
right now. Anyway,
Right.
I feel like right now, we need to find the up and coming comics and the musicians, by the way, with music videos that
Yeah.
want to monetize. It's pretty hard to monetize music at all these
Yep.
days. Certainly,
Mm-hmm.
Spotify isn't a big help.
Yep.
You're getting, I was mentioning before 2/10 of a penny. They're getting hundredths and thousandths of a penny, through
Mm.
Spotify. So, our view is it's going to be more the indie creator, whether they're the music video people, the musicians, whether it's the comedians that are coming up and they're indie right now, or the indie filmmakers. That to me, at this stage in our growth, will be the sweet spot.
Now, on your platform, can people have like channels within their uh
They can indeed. They
okay.
create so their own account represents a channel of just their content. So in other words, they could market a link to just their entire catalog, or they could market a link to one particular video or film within their, that they're monetizing. And it's up to them. And one other thing about the marketing too that I like to point out, people don't a lot of some. It's not exactly. Some people don't think of this. Maybe some do, but the idea that it's so easy to advertise these links these days on either Google search or Instagram, or it's just X, or it's very easy to advertise links for. You can spend $10 and get seen by 1,000 eyeballs very easily. So imagine somebody has a little sample clip of something that they're doing, and whether it's their music video or their podcast or their comedy or something. They have a little sample clip, and then they say, "Oh, to watch the rest, click here." And by the way, it's only whatever $2 or some amount. Um, if you can get seen by 1,000 people for $10, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if and you imagine you only need, let's say it's 6 people. If you're earning $2, to go back to the example we gave before, again, the numbers could be higher or lower, but if you only need 6 people to say yes out of the 1,000 that see your ad,
Mm-hmm.
and then what's happened then? You've made $12 after spending 10 on the
Mm.
advertising
Mm-hmm.
because 6 people have clicked out of the 1,000.
Yeah.
Well, now you've created a model that you can scale yourself.
Mm.
Now instead of spending 10 to get 12, you can spend 100 to get 120, or you can
Yeah.
spend 1,000 to get 1,200.
Yeah.
Basically, and
And that's only on
I'm
the first
the idea
view.
advertising these links is a thing that never existed when I was growing. The Mad Men days of
Yeah.
advertising, when you had big companies sitting. You can advertise for $10 and just get it and see how many people buy it.
And that's only on the first view, right? I mean, you're spending 10 to get $12, but they could repeat themselves on the next video or podcast and now you've just scaled it.
Then they're a fan. Then they might be a
The
fan of
fan,
yours.
right?
So
Yeah.
then the next video, you're already right. You're already on their radar.
That's brilliant. I love it.
But people don't think. I'll tell you, people do not think of that. They think of just, I want to put my stuff on a site and have the site market it.
Yep.
Like it'll be, I need to get my stuff on, Amazon or Netflix and have Netflix market it, or have, well, that's, good luck. So I would say it's not that easy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, if you do a little marketing yourself, you can break through in a way that a lot of people haven't thought about.
Can you have a paywall within VidaFair beyond what they're paying for the video? So let me give you an example. Like you use Patreon, right? A lot of creators will, they'll charge for the subscription to their channel. And then if they want like you said, part 2, let's just use that it's a simple example, right? The person's got to pay $10 to even get to their channel. And then they put a video out there. They'll give them the first couple minutes of the video. If you want the rest of the video, you got to pay an additional $5. Is that something that can be done on your platform too?
Well, the way we would do it is just have people then upload separate parts as separate pay-per-views. Uh, yeah, if you have a subscription model, it has the version of a subscription model that you're explaining, where there could be levels or tiers
Yeah.
where you pay more for a deeper subscription. Since we don't have a subscription model, we're kind of already signed up where you just rent the next thing and you can rent the next thing, and you
Mhm.
can. So you, as a creator, you can decide yourself how to do those allocations.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, are you familiar with Russell Brunson? Branson. No, Russell Branson. He created the lead magnet guru. He created ClickFunnels. Are you familiar with
Okay,
ClickFunnels?
I'm sorry, I don't. Tell me.
Okay. He's a great marketer, but that's basically how his ClickFunnel situation works is where, you're selling somebody on the initial, right? And then once they get through the first payment, they move to an upsell on page 2. And they're like, well, since you bought this, if you want this bundle, it's an extra $10. It's normally $199, but I'll give it to you for 10. And then you're like, oh, okay. And then they have another paywall that they keep upselling them until the person finally says, no, I've had enough. I've paid for enough. But I mean, anyone that uses his platform, they kill it monetarily with their product or service that they're trying to sell with that method.
Okay, I mean, I would say that people can, some of those things. You also worry about annoying people,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yep.
or too much of that, and so I'm always balancing, what a creator would want with what
Mhm.
a consumer would want.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So, if you how is VidaFair making its money? Because if you're just passing the cost of the storage and streaming, where do you guys get your profit?
So I'm not saying that our fees are exactly equal to our costs. I'm
Mm,
saying we base our fees on our costs. So
gotcha.
cost plus margin. So we have a margin, but the margin is tied to the actual cost rather than tied to some other thing like what the creator charges.
Mhm, mhm. Do you find a challenge now with, I know you guys had just started, but, scaling in terms of the data warehousing of all of this content? Because content takes up a lot of storage.
True, but we not I mean, not the not really anymore. Like the data farms
Mm,
worldwide, cloud storage, et cetera, with all kinds of redundancy
yeah.
and scalability have become so good.
Yeah.
That has not been a problem. Now, like, I don't know, if we had some sort of incredibly, some sort of video that had, I don't know, the Mars landing, and we were the only site that had it, and it got 10 billion,
Yeah.
10 billion or something. Maybe we would not scale properly and crash or something,
Mhm.
but so far it's not been an issue for us. Yeah, we found pretty robust. I mean, I guess I'd say we use AWS,
I
so
was just gonna
just
say,
our
you guys are probably using AWS or Azure,
yeah.
so, yeah,
So we have not found a problem with that.
that's very good. So what's your goal with the business? Are you, obviously get it as big as possible, right? But do you have any immediate goals in terms of trying to achieve, within the next 12 to 24 months?
Sure. I mean, I think our we sometimes change and adjust, but I think the podcaster market feels like the place to go for us. Even though we launched with independent film, I
Mhm.
think video podcasts is the place we. So I'm thinking of going. There's a Pod Fest, which is a podcast festival in Florida in January, which I'm thinking of going and speaking at. And so there are that I think that will be a short term six, at least next 6 month focus is kind of build our. I mean, most people don't know we exist. Again, of
Sure.
course. So it's that's with any kind of startup. You have this challenge
Mhm.
just to get even people to know you're there.
Yeah, the
So,
awareness, absolutely.
yeah.
Um, so are you a solo entrepreneur, or do you have partners in this endeavor?
Well, we have employees, but no, I'm sort of the founder and I'm kind of the, it's kind of my, I'm kind of the Steve Jobs at this point, you might say. That's good. I know it's more self gratification. It's sort of a self glory, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I should make humbler analogies, but anyway. You know.
So one of the biggest uh, things behind this podcast, Raw and Relentless, is overcoming adversity. So what have you found has been one of the biggest challenges, or a few big challenges for you in starting this endeavor and trying to grow it?
Sure. I've said this in a few other interviews, but I'll say it again. Is because it's a lot of people kind of find it people find it fun to hear all the screw ups that you've made, and I do too, by the way, as a listener of these things. Um, so early on, I hired the wrong people,
Mm.
and I did it. I just at the very you have this. You're starting out at the very beginning of this idea, and you do some things on your own, but then it's time to start hiring people to start programming code and creating
Mhm.
a back end, and you need banking interfaces, and you need phone apps, and people starting to program. So yeah, I basically hired people by, soliciting resumes for this kind of work by going on one of those. What's that? So Upwork, I guess it was.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that
Yep.
site? That's what I did originally. I'm like, well, let me just try this. It's okay. And I saw that I got all this, all these resumes. I'm looking through. Oh, these three look good. Do some calls. Okay, well, this person looks like the best of the lot. So I hired that person, and it was just a giant mistake. It was basically first thing that person did was they went and hired an Indian software company to do the work I thought they were going
Oh
to do.
man.
Then they started fighting with the Indian company that they hired. So they would stop. Then the Indian company wouldn't even talk to them anymore. So I'm now the negotiator slash mediator between these two entities. And then by the end of the day, we had to basically just throw out all the code and start over. But the way I started over, here's the lesson. The way I started over was I said, all right, I want to leverage, like all in my career up until now, um, the way I've gotten most of my jobs is through personal connections, personal relationships.
Yep.
I'm like, let me leverage that instead of doing some online thing where I get a bunch of random people emailing me. And so I contacted some schools that do what's called full stack programming education. They train programmers, and I'm like, well, these people at these schools, and one in particular, called me back, and they have seen hundreds and thousands of students go through there, and they know the landscape. They know who's really good, and it's not just who's good; it's also who's honest. It's also who's hardworking, not just smart. It's
Sure.
also all these things, right? That are intangibles that it's hard to assess from an interview after you get a resume, right? All of
Mhm.
these deeper things about a person's work ethic and whatnot. But
Mhm.
if you engage human beings who know them personally, it's so much better.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I ended up then hiring someone who had been a former instructor at that school
Oh.
who was fantastic, just great, just a fantastic person. And then off we went. And then we tried to actually fix that bad code from the first adventure, and then ended up just throwing it after a while. Like we just threw it out and started over. So that was one lesson of mine.
Are they still with you to this day?
Uh, some yes, some no. Like so through those connections, I then met more people, and then from them I met more people. But that basically put us in a direction that we're still on. Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
right. Yeah, some of those people I'm still working with.
What um what is your plans for the platform in terms of what other um amenities, or however you want to call it, advances can you put
Features.
in the
Yeah,
software?
we've added a few features. We haven't promoted them too hard. We a little bit, but we've added a gift feature where if you love a podcast or something that you spent $1 or $2 or $5 on it, whatever, and you know a friend who would really love it, you can gift it to them where you pay, so the creator gets paid,
Hmm.
but then the person you're sending it to sees it for free because you're
Oh.
gifting. We have another feature called Sponsor, which is kind of gift on steroids, where you love something so much, you will pay for the next 5, 10, or 50 or 100 people to see it, and the creator gets paid. But now it's free for the next X number of people that you chose to pay for to see the content. We haven't had too much pickup on those features yet, but maybe we need to promote them more. But those are the kinds of ideas we're thinking about. And then there's other things too where we don't really have. So our site is mostly designed for the creators to market to their social media followers. Here's my content.
Mhm.
Um, But we also do some marketing on our own. We have our own Instagram and our own YouTube and our own, X and Facebook and LinkedIn, for example. So we plan on ramping up some of those promotions too, including where you can, if you love the Bob Bowdon page on VidaFair because you've already rented something from me and you think I'm fantastic, you can click to get emails about future uploads.
Mm.
Oh, this person you like has just uploaded a new video, and here's the link. That kind of stuff.
Do you think, do you have any plans to get AI integrated into the platform at all?
Not immediately. It's funny. We've been that's been a thing that's been brought up. Quite frankly, when I first was launching this, people were begging me to, can you just incorporate crypto somehow? Find a way to stick crypto. They want crypto now. Just find a way to make the payments crypto payments or
Yeah.
Bitcoin or something. And I remember just thinking, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I know it's a fad and a trend, and maybe VC guys will love it if I just say the word crypto. But I'm like, I feel a little bit like that with AI. That's kind of like, can you just stick AI in there somehow? People just love it so much, they'll just go crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm old fashioned. I do come from a world where human beings created,
Yeah.
films and so we haven't really done much in the way of we do have an algorithm for what appears at the top of our homepage,
Hmm.
which is different every day. So
Hmm.
that's I could kind of call it it's really not AI. It's more of an algorithm actually,
Sure.
but
Sure.
um, and we have a suggestion algorithm for if I rented this or I'm even looking at this, I might also, here's other videos you might be interested in.
Hmm.
So those are things, by the way, that are not on Patreon. That kind of thing of a suggestion algorithm for other
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
But but to me, not so much AI at this point. I mean, quite frankly, I wouldn't even know exactly how to incorporate it. Maybe you can tell me.
That is a good question. I wouldn't even know where to start. I think I need to play around with your platform a little bit first before I answer that.
Okay,
Which
fair enough.
I'm gonna do when we hang
I
up
would
here. I
love
mean,
it.
yeah,
And I'll tell it to all your listeners and viewers too. Like, any feedback, we've learned a lot
yeah.
from people who have, you're really close to something, and you often can't see it from the eyes of a
Hmm.
fresh,
Hmm.
viewer. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we love feedback.
That's great. Bob, thanks so much for coming on. This was really cool. I feel like I can talk to you for another hour beyond just the platform, but even just your history, your resume is fascinating. I would love to learn more. So we'll have to get you
Well, it's so
back
much.
on.
You're a tell me where you're speaking to me from. I usually ask before we start the podcast, but I didn't do that this time. Where are you?
I'm right outside of Chicago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I'm right outside of
I have
Chicago.
some kind of roots around there. Undergrad, I went to Purdue, which is not too
That's
far from
that's where I
Chicago.
went.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you're
So
familiar with the
the
area.
basketball team is 3-0 or so far. If you're following that.
Yeah. No, I'm not following. I'm too unfortunately, I'm so busy I can't even follow the Bears. So I know they suck right now from what I understand, but it is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure this will age really quickly, but not age well. But the Purdue has a big Alabama game coming tomorrow. So,
Mm,
and Alabama is ranked number 2 in the country, and
yep.
Purdue is ranked number 13. So, we'll see what happens.
That's a big deal. Bob, where can people find you outside of
Sure.
VidaFair?
Sure, it's just 8 letters. VIDA, like Vida, like life that's fair. Vida fair,
Okay.
fairness in life. That's kind of one interpretation. So VIDAFAIR, and you put a .com at the end. And you can also go to that. You can download the apps. Just VIDAFAIR. It also means video affair, by the way. So it's a double entendre. It means life, Vida fair, fairness, life that's fair. It also means video affair. Anyway,
Love it.
VIDAFAIR.
Are you on Instagram or LinkedIn or anything like that?
All of those:
Great.
LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube.
Great. I'll be sure to put those in the show notes. Go check out VidaFair. Go check out Bob. Bob, thanks so much for coming on. This was fantastic.
Anytime. Thanks, Bo.
Thank you.